The Doug local user groups, called Doug Meetups, are growing. Find your local meetup today by visiting the Doug Hub on the left menu bar. Please welcome our heroic sponsor, Innovia Consulting and community superhero, Savannah Dill. Today, she'll be presenting on Powering Up User Experience, the Power BI Usability Blueprint, presented by Innovia Consulting.
All right. Hello, DynamicsCon. It is a pleasure to be back and speaking at DynamicsCon Virtual. This is my second year in a row presenting, and today I'm excited to talk to you about powering up your user experience, the Power BI Usability Blueprint. And before we get started, if you don't know me, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Savannah Dill. I am a Power Platform consultant at Innovia Consulting. If you would like to get a hold of me, my contact information is on this screen. I'm also fairly active on LinkedIn. A little bit about myself. I am 4 times Microsoft certified, all the way up to the Power Platform Solution Architect Expert certification level. I am the Indiana Doug chapter leader. We are actually set to have our first meeting very soon. So if you're interested in that, feel free to join our meetup page. I have also been recognized for various awards, and I run a blog called Not a Pickle because my last name is Dill, Pickle, get it? So if you're interested in content revolving around Power BI and Business Central, feel free to check that out on LinkedIn or at Not a Pickle blog, notapickle.blog. All right, so jumping right in, we're going to start off talking about a usability crash course. So this next section is all about usability. Why should you care about usability and how it's applicable and used within Power BI? You might know if you're in the weeds in the community that usability, user experience, accessibility are all very hot topics when it comes to the Power Platform. This is more so true for Power Apps because when you're building applications, having the best user experience is very important. Because of this, I think Power BI can often be overshadowed, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today. So when thinking about usability, I would like to define it. So for today's case, the term usability is all about creating Power BI reports that instead of putting the software in the center of your focus, put the user in the center of your focus. Also, when considering usability, there are 5 components. There is learnability. Learnability looks at how easy it is for you, for a user to accomplish basic tasks for the first time they interact with your product. In this case, how well do they achieve basic tasks the first time that they open your Power BI report? Some questions might be, do they struggle with a particular piece? Does the user get frustrated with how to accomplish certain tasks? And because of this, does it hinder the rest of the experience using Power BI? The second component is efficiency. So efficiency analyzes the user's ability to quickly perform tasks once they've learned the design. Some questions revolving around efficiency would be, are they stumbling on tasks that should seem fairly straightforward? And you might ask yourself why. Because something might be obvious to you as a report builder, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be straightforward for the end user. So that's all things to keep in mind as you're building reports. The next component is memorability. Say your user has gone on vacation and they have taken some time away from the hustle and bustle of business, but now they're back. Once they return, how quickly can they reestablish their proficiency with navigating and using your report? If your report is intuitive, then the relearning time should be rather small. All right, the next component is errors. With errors, that would be a good time for reflection with your user, for you to track how many errors do users make, and how severe those errors were. This helps you as a report builder because not only does it improve and enhance your design in the future, but it also can help as you begin to move on to the educational portion that comes with BI, and teaching a user how to use something like Power BI Service. The last component of usability is satisfaction. This is just determining how pleasant your design is to use, and this can make a difference in whether or not your users will come back to it and actually utilize it in their business. All right, and the last thing in the usability crash course that I want to cover is, does usability mean accessibility? In this case, and in every case, I would say usability does not equal accessibility. Throughout my experience, I have gained a deep understanding of both of these. I have my master's degree from Ball State University in user experience design, which is why I'm very passionate about this. Usability and accessibility tend to get used concurrently, interchangeably, and it's important to know that accessibility is really a subset of usability, and something is not going to be fully usable unless it is accessible. And on the same side of that coin, something is not if something is not accessible, it cannot be usable for everyone. So keeping those two things in mind and knowing how they interact with each other is really important. And to kind of break them out into their own definitions, usability is about making a product efficient, effective, and satisfying. And accessibility is relating to creating the best user experience so that all can equally perceive, understand, and interact with a product. So while usability does not equal accessibility, they are important and they do complement each other. All right, the next thing I would like to talk about is the Power BI usability blueprint. Starting off with the Power BI usability journey. This graphic may look very confusing to you, but I think it's a wonderful breakdown of how the process goes from, start to finish when building Power BI reports. First, you're going to start up and top with empathizing with your user. In these steps, you're going to do things like task analysis, functional analysis, and you're going to discover the user's pain points. You're going to ask them questions about their process and what they currently do. Perhaps you may have them walk you through that process to help uncover things that weren't verbalized. Once you have empathized with your user, you have gathered requirements, you will then define your requirements, and that is kind of outlined in the next step. So you will empathize, and then you will define your requirements and usability goals. Once you have that, you can then move on to your design, develop, and test stage. In this stage, it's where you will, follow the standard process for building a Power BI report. You'll start with your data sources. You will move on to ETL transformations. You will then create any measures, custom columns, calculated columns, anything of that nature that enhance your data model, as well as building relationships you will do. And then you can move on to the fun stuff such as visualizing your data and then testing it. Once you think you're done with your report, you can then ask yourself, does this report meet the usability goals that we defined in step 2. If no, then you can return to one of the other 3 steps, the ETL, the DAX, or the visualize. You can return to those wherever your requirements fell short, and then you can go back to testing, and then you can ask yourself the same question of, did this meet the usability goals? If then yes, then you should have the green light to do a soft launch. In this step, typically, I would recommend that a stakeholder review is done. And once the review is done, you can ask yourself with the client, were all the usability goals met? If the stakeholder says no, then you will go back and reiterate again and kind of go in a flowing circle until all usability goals have been met. Once all usability goals have been met by you and the stakeholder, you can then move on to a hard launch where you may break the report out into various workspaces. You may create different iterations, etc. And during this phase, just because it's a hard launch, that doesn't mean you won't continue to get feedback or make enhancements. Usability and user experience is a continuous process that is fluid and often evolves over time. All right, and moving on, I just kind of want to go over some checklists. So we have an empathy checklist and a usability checklist, which we'll talk about next. An empathy checklist is something that you can use in step 1 of our process. And these are just some questions that you might ask the user as you begin to work with them and Power BI. Starting off, what is your current process and can you walk me through it? Perhaps this user has never used Power BI, perhaps they're skeptical of Power BI, or they're very cautious when transferring from one software to Power BI. Having them walk you through their process can not only visualize what it is they are trying to achieve, but it can also kind of highlight things that weren't verbalized. You will also ask them, what are your pain points with this process? During this time, they can talk about their frustrations with their current process, and that can give you some ideas to see if Power BI can alleviate some of those pain points for them. Another question to ask is, who will this report be for? And will you need different iterations for this report? Just because you're talking to a stakeholder, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're always going to be the one digesting this report. So asking who the report will be built for is a great question, because different occupations require a different lens. Other questions you might ask is, what purpose does X serve your business? So what is your current process doing for you, and what do you hope to achieve with Power BI? And then the last question to ask, is there anything non-traditional about your data? This is always a great question to ask when exploring the possibility of Power BI. If you plan on creating a report, having data structure issues can always be a fun surprise. It's best to know if there's anything non-traditional with their data beforehand. Maybe they have some customizations that you should be aware of that just make the process easier for both parties. And here is a usability checklist. Things to consider when building a report for the best user experience. Considering the use of color, that is huge. Not only does color fall into usability, but it also falls under accessibility. So knowing your user after you have empathized with them, knowing if there's any colors you should avoid, is grand. Also trying to avoid using very neon colors. Typically, if you have text over neon or anything in that realm, it's very hard on the eyes. It's very hard to read. typically I go by the rule of thumb. If I wouldn't want to read it like that, I don't think anyone else would either. Other checklist items would be to remove unnecessary jargon or acronyms. Coming into the world of business after college, I was very shocked to have conversations with others where acronyms were flowing, and I'm like nodding and smiling, like, I know what you're talking about, but in reality, I didn't, and that is true for Power BI reports as well. Adding descriptive, meaningful titles, if applicable, can really help make things clear with your report, as well as having consistency throughout your report. Typically, if I have one layout, I stick with it throughout all the pages of the report with titles and slicers, etc. Also, don't use tooltips to convey important information because it could get hidden. Any important information should be front and center and should be easily accessible and read from other visuals on your page. Also, adding explanatory text as needed to describe your charts and other necessary content is very important to give context. And also a page order. With Power BI, you can have multiple pages in a report. Having a page order that is meaningful to the user can create a better user experience because they're not clicking around everywhere as they progress throughout their data journey. All right, and lastly, I just want to give some Power BI usability hacks. These hacks will help you as you begin your journey, or perhaps you have been in the game for a while. All right, so starting off with keyboard shortcuts. Keyboard shortcuts are something that I use every day, and a lot of people don't know this, but if you hit Shift and the question mark, once you have Power BI Desktop open, it actually opens a keyboard shortcut menu, and it gives you keyboard shortcuts to things like page navigation, slicers, Power Query, and DAX. So many good keyboard shortcuts that make you as a report builder more efficient. One of my favorite keyboard shortcuts is Control G in the Power Query editor, and that will let you go to a specific column. So if you have, a query with many columns, instead of scrolling and trying to find that one column, hit Control G, click on it, and it will take you there. Also, using tools like the Performance Analyzer. So in Power BI Desktop, you can find out how each of your report elements, such as visuals and DAX formulas, are performing by using the Performance Analyzer. You can see and record logs that measure how each of your report elements perform and when users interact with them. This will tell you which aspects of their performance are most or least resource intensive, and therefore making by using the Performance Analyzer, you can make your reports more efficient and user-friendly by taking away those hindering aspects of your report. Also, using things like DAX Studio to create and evaluate your DAX is a great tool prior to Power BI, and keeping the general rule of thumb of less than or equal to 10 visuals or elements, so non-data-driven things like pictures or shapes per report page for the best performance. Also, utilizing features such as Q&A. Q&A, I think, is often overlooked, but is a great resource where users can use natural language to ask questions about their data, and it will populate a response. Really cool and often overlooked, but a lot of users really like them, as well as, other features, but those are the primary hacks that I have for report builders. On the flip side, I would also like to talk about report viewer hacks. So if you're a viewer and much of this has not meant much to you, this slide is for you. So starting off, Power BI is meant to be dynamic. Visuals are meant to interact with each other. So if your report builder has created relationships and whatnot correctly, if you click on one, say a slicer or a visual, the rest of your page should react. It is meant to do this, and it is the reason why a lot of people enjoy Power BI. Some other hacks for a report viewer is to learn or ask for training on Power BI service. So Power BI service is going to be the primary place where you view your reports. You can utilize things such as favorites. If you have many reports, you can create apps that can put reports together in one place as long as they originate from the same workspace. And there's plenty of other features in Power BI service that are great. It is important to learn Power BI service because it's the primary place where you digest and view your reports. So learning to navigate it is super important. Also, having your report builder implement workspaces, if applicable, is super important because it enables you to break things out and customize who has permissions for viewing these reports. So, for example, you might have a C-suite workspace, you might have a sales workspace, and you might have an HR workspace. Maybe you don't want sales to view HR reports, that's fine. Because with workspaces, you can add permissions to see who has access to them. Also understanding report enhancements, so things like bookmarks, slicers, drill downs. It's not important for you to know how they are built, but it's important for you as a viewer to know how they work and how you can utilize them because they will then enhance your viewing experience. Alrighty, and wrapping up, just taking a quick break for a summary. Usability in Power BI is a very critical step and consideration as you build reports. Thinking about the key components of usability and considerations of usability as you create your reports will not only make your report more efficient, it will also create the best user experience for your viewer, which in turn will reward you with nothing but positivity. All right, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much, and thank you for Dynamics User Group for allowing me to speak, and I will see you guys at the Q&A.